Fearless.
Provocative. Straight talking. We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Provocative. Straight talking.
Fearless.
Provocative.
Welcome to The Pledge, the programme committed to straight-talking, fearless and unmoderated debate. In this show, Emma will show us some childhood photographs, Michelle reminding us that the customer is always right, Graeme will be talking about a subject that's very close to his heart, and Greg will be shooting himself in the foot. Metaphorically speaking, clearly. But it's my turn first, and I want to start with an iconic picture of the nation's capital. It's a postcard image like this that brings 17 million people to London every year. But now take away this, and you lose a huge part of the city's unique offering. It just wouldn't be the same. We must act to protect our black cabs from the damage being done to them by Uber. I applaud innovation in our ever-changing market, and I recognise that tech is enhancing the way we live. But at what cost? We risk losing part of our heritage and destroying the livelihood of black cab drivers whose expertise I admire. Let's change the rules and make this a level playing field so that Uber isn't allowed to pick up a job which now they're calling e-hailing in central London or the city airports. Boris Johnson let down London's black cabbies, and I challenge London's new mayor, Caan, to save our black cabs.
I also really respect the knowledge, as it's called, what black cabbies know, the way they know their way around the streets of London. And I have to say, though, it isn't Uber that is killing their industry. It's a little thing called a sat-nav. It's a GPS. I mean, that's what changed the game long before Uber came along. And I think it's really, really difficult to take away innovation once it's there. And actually, it's all about money. You know that as a businessman. People look at what it costs to get a black cab versus Uber, and they say, I'm going to get an Uber if they understand how the app works, which not everybody does, granted. So I think it's very difficult what you're saying. I mean, I'd like to understand more about what you're saying in terms of the rules changing to row back on innovation once it's already been there.
And as I said in my opening, that I'm not questioning the importance of technology. I applaud it, I enhance it. My question is, we have something that, as a nation, we should be proud of. We are unique all over the world. Everybody who comes to England, our black cab is a status of who we are, and I'm really proud of that. So what I'm saying is that it should be a level playing field. When you become a black cabbie, you have to spend 4 years to learn about your profession you are. You have to invest a huge amount of money for the black cab, and in return, what the government says, and for doing that, we will give you the right that you can pick up people off the street. Technology has now not made it a level playing field. So what I'm frustrated by, and let me just finish, a guy can arrive in England on a Monday, and by Wednesday, you know, he's now competing with a black cab driver. He doesn't have to take the knowledge. He doesn't have to invest the same amount of money. And what I'm saying is that the government should step in, change the rules and say, either in central London or within that congestion charge zone, only black cabs can pick them up. If there is a price differential, the government should say, if, therefore, black cabbies, you want exclusivity, then you need to moderate your price. But my point is, if we do nothing, there will not be black cabs in this country within the next 5 years.
And, James, I could not agree with you more. I love the black cabs. I love all drivers. It's great that they're getting out there and they're actually doing something for a living. But I love black cabs. And I'm so frustrated that, you know, they have to go through all the years and years, as you said, and have to pay for the licence. And why is it someone can just come in and within the next couple of days not pay for a licence, take you to Heathrow Airport for £46 when a black cab, you know, the prices are set by Transport London, and that will cost you almost £80. So I really feel sorry for them, and I don't use Uber anymore. I'll only use black cabs because I want to support them.
The problem is, though, it is a privilege to get in a black cab for lots of reasons. One, because they're fantastic drivers. They do a great job. People feel safer in black cabs as well. all of those things, the knowledge that they have of how to get to places in the shortest possible time, the back routes when the London streets are busy. But they're also a privilege in the sense of the people that get into them because they're so expensive. I go into London a lot on the train, and I'll only use a black cab when I really have to, because the problem is, one is cost and two is availability. Now, obviously, if there are declining numbers, as we see there are, availability is going down. So there's a void there that's being filled. There's a price void that's being filled because Uber and companies like that will do it cheaper. And there's a void being filled because of the availability of cabs at peak times. And that's always been the case. I've lived in London for 30 years. Trying to get a cab on a Friday night after the pubs come out is almost impossible. So I completely see both sides of... No, they definitely wouldn't take me. Especially if they were Tottenham fans.
Yeah, there is that.
But the fact, for me, is that there has to be some protectionism, which you're suggesting, but it's got to be done in a way that doesn't mean that the customer has to pay so much more to get the black cab, so it has to be subsidised. I don't know how you propose
No, but
you would
Graeme,
do that.
I'm not saying that it should be privileged. What I'm saying is it should be a level playing field. So I respected the government when they said, look, if you do 4 years of the knowledge and you pay for a black cab, we'll give you something in return. It makes sense, it's fair. Now they're saying, you do all the knowledge, you spend 4 years, you spend all that money buying the black cab, and yet we're going to treat you the same as we treat a minicab driver. It's just not right. Now, the point I'm making...
I've never talked... I mean, I like black cab drivers, and I always try and talk to them because, you know, they give you a view of the world. I've never met one who said, life's great, I'm really enjoying myself. I mean, almost to be a black cab driver, it's a qualification to be a black cab driver, to moan. You know, and... I recognise the point you're making, and I think you need to have Uber regulated. Properly regulated.
But do you regulate them up? Do you regulate them up so they become more expensive, or do you bring the price of the black cab down?
Imagine what's going to happen. If I'm right, and the black cabs are going to get phased out in the next 5 years, Uber will dominate. They'll have 50,000 drivers in London alone. They'll monopolise the market. Will it still be as cheap as it is now? Because you'll give them a monopoly, because you're not in control of them.
And the other thing is, as well, they'll be able to use the bus lanes soon as well. And that's the advantage of a black cab. But unfortunately, I think that the black cabs have lost to technology. If you're a student, you're going with your friends, you're going out, you can split the bill on your app, on your phone, with an Uber.
Or Uber Pool.
And you don't have to say, oh, I'll give you that back and I'll give you that back. I mean, technology, most cabs do not take cards.
I think the thing that we haven't talked about, and I do think this is where we are in agreement, is the idea of a false economy being created. Because at the moment, I was looking at Uber's figures, and they're notoriously tight-lipped about their figures. Their valuation at the moment is around $65 billion. They've closed around 9-10 billion round in investment, and they're losing $1 billion a year in China, roughly. But apparently they've started to make a profit in America, according to sources close to Uber. I think what's interesting about this tech world, I used to cover it, I used to be out in Silicon Valley and look at it all the time, was that there's bubbles going on. So there's huge valuations, huge amounts of money going in, which is supporting this economy around Uber. So actually, one of the criticisms of Uber is obviously that the drivers are not employees. You know, they are not having to be paid for. You'll know how much employees cost, they're contractors.
And they're not vetted properly.
So there is an issue around, are we going to lose something that is precious to the UK, is an identifiable thing, because of an industry that's being allowed to grow due to lots of cash injection from VCs without actually necessarily the business model there in place with some of the responsibilities that come with that. But that said, all of my friends use Uber. Every single one of them. It's the only taxi cab, especially all the women, late at night. It has completely changed the game.
But it's not as safe as a black cab.
How do you bridge that gap? How do you protect that market? I mean, because that's the big question.
I think Michelle made a great point. TfL is who regulates the black cabs. They also set the price. So I would literally sit down with the black cab drivers and say, you cannot compete with technology. It is here and it will stay. But you've got to change your pricing because you've got to be more compatible now and you've got to be able to compete in the open market. Remember, they can't do that. They can't price surge, you know, when the traffic's really bad. Uber can. It's not a level playing field.
But also,
competition is healthy, but it's not fair because they have to go through all this for licensing.
But there's different rules for different people.
But surely part of the pricing for a black cab is the fact that it is so expensive to buy a black cab, to maintain a black cab. They have to keep it to a very high standard. The costs of running that are going to then be passed on to the customers, and that's why the bills for us are higher than, say, an Uber. But how do you bridge that gap?
I would certainly, if I was looking at this from a purely business point of view, I would say to the black cab drivers, the world is changing. you do something that is unique, that you invest your time, we have to give you something in return, and therefore that exclusivity of central London, where they are the only people who can effectively take somebody off the street. You know, an app is e-hailing, you're still taking people off the street. Their income would go back up, and therefore they could reduce the price. Today, they're losing 30% of their income. They cannot stay in business anymore.
And when your business is going down, innovation kicks in, and innovation will make you grow again. And
so I want to give them exclusivity. I want to give them something for what they do. I want to make it a level playing field. And if that means that for exclusivity, I give them more business because they've got the patch, it will work for the consumer and the driver.
But on the consumer point, sorry, Greg, just very quickly, you talked there about Uber not being as safe as black cab drivers or whatever the record is there. I just want to say from Uber, their statement on this is, we're deeply committed to providing a ride people can trust. Our technology allows us to focus on safety before, during and after every trip. Every one incident of this nature is one too many.
Can I just very quickly bring you in? I mean, I'm disappointed with Boris Johnson because he really let them down. Just have a look at this clip.
To all the Luddites in the room who don't want to see new technology, and I don't want to see new technology, and I don't count you among them.
Says it all.
Right, well, there you go. It's good to finish on that. A look of genuine pity and sorrow comes across people's faces when I tell them I'm an only child. You did it earlier, James. Or another look of, that explains it then, swiftly followed by a jokey presumption that I must be spoilt and annoying or introverted and weird. Well, you can make up your own mind. But I want to make the case for only children, loud and proud, because contrary to what you mistakenly think, we're just fine. In fact, academic studies around the world show that often we do better in school, have higher self-esteem, are more motivated and, whisper it, are more socially gifted than those very odd people with siblings. And yet, we are pitied. And parents of only children are routinely made to feel guilty and selfish, like they've deprived their little ones by giving them no siblings. Well, I didn't long for a brother or sister when I was growing up. Look at me here, aged around 5. I couldn't be happier. And as friends start to talk about families in my own group, we talk about how many children we'd like. None of my friends ever say they want one. I'm not here to tell anyone how many kids to have, but more to make the case that one is an option, and not a bad one either. I mean, Elvis, Frank Sinatra, Leonardo da Vinci, they didn't do too bad, did they?
I think it's an interesting debate. I'm an only child, and I couldn't be any more loved.
I did not know that.
Yes, I'm
That's
an only
a good reveal here. OK, this is good.
And I think we've just got to allow people to choose what's right for them.
OK, well, I'm first of all, didn't know that, and there's 2 of us on this panel, so I'm feeling good here.
Blondes.
Not alone here for what...
So hang on, you want to be an only child, but you're happy that there's 2 of you?
Well, no,
I
love it. I love it when I find out other people are only children, because it is rarer amongst my generation. It's actually getting more common. The figures show that in 7 years, 50% of UK families will only have one child. And I just think it's a fascinating thing, because people do always say to me, God, were you OK? You know, like I'm a survivor.
But if you look at China, they've tried what you're saying, and they have failed.
I did not say we should have a one-child policy
what I'm
in
just
Britain.
saying, they did that. Well, I'm just giving you some back.
Thank
you.
You're
promoting it, they promoted it, and I don't think it's worked.
They didn't promote it, they enforced it. They forced people to have
work.
abortions.
Okay, so they took you at another level and said, it's good, let's be proud of it, let's not knock it. And it's not worked. Divorce rate is climbing every year and has done over 10 years. They are incredibly spoilt. They're very self-indulgent.
Who's they? Are you talking about all Chinese here?
No, I'm talking about the one-child families. I'm just saying some of the consequences of what you say, it's all not, kind of...
No, there are. Listen,
issues.
There are downsides. I don't think you can say.
But don't just sugarcoat it. Let's give both sides of the argument. There are just as many situations where the one-child family doesn't really work very well. He is more lonely. His social skills are not probably as developed as they would be.
This is such generalisation. And I don't know who he is, but I'll be his mate. I mean, literally, I don't think there is what you're saying anymore, because I think people are
You're just generalising.
No.
Just because it was OK for you...
I think it's generalising to say what you have said, which is always what is said about only children. How many children are you from? How many siblings do you have?
We have a few.
How many?
There was just the 7 of us.
There's 7 of you. OK.
That's right.
And if you were first, they probably would have only had one.
OK, but there is...
All right, Greg.
I'll admit to being one of 3. I'm terribly sorry, but
one of 3.
One of 3, the youngest of 3, and I've had 4. So big families by your standards, but. There's an economic issue in all this. I mean, if you actually just have... I mean, if you look at what's happening in Germany, what's happening in Italy, where disproportionately having one child, actually, you're getting a very aging, large population, and you're not replacing themselves.
No, I'm not saying there aren't
So if you're
issues.
going to start exploding that everybody should only have one child...
No, I've not said that. God, nuance is lost on this programme. I'm saying it's not a bad thing if it happens.
There's no story if you don't have...
All right, go on.
But surely this is more about you and your perception of being an only child than it is the reality.
It's other people's perception of
because
what it's like.
I would never have known either of you were only children, and quite frankly, I don't care. I judge you on how I find you, and if I think you're selfish, spoilt, none of those things I do, by the way, and it's all about you, then I would make that judgment. But I would make that judgment. I would make that judgment on you, not on the fact you're an only child.
Do you know what I found really interesting when I was researching this? Because I've never actually looked up what's going on with it. I mean, I knew about China and I knew some of the downsides, and there's some really serious things that obviously happens when the state tells you how many children to have. Women go off into
boys.
well, no, they go off into the bushes and have illegal abortions, have awful things going on there. So it's not necessarily a joking matter when a state gets involved with birth control, but very far from it. But what I was interested in is how many parents now, actually to your point, Greg, can't afford necessarily more than one child. And they would like to have a child, they just choose to have one. A lot of people, it isn't a choice. That's all that happens. There's medical issues. So we just cover that off. But all I would say is I saw on the forums how guilty they are made to feel by other parents. I'd never thought about this. By not giving their kids siblings, not giving them this full experience. And I'd never thought about it from the adult perspective before. And I just thought that was very interesting.
You don't think because you're... I mean, it's interesting you're making the argument here. I mean, if those of us who aren't single children, would never come along here and say, make the argument for the family of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5.
Well, that's because you're the norm.
Well, it's not even about being the norm. It must have had some...
we will be at that
But it must have had some impact on you if to make you come here and argue it.
Well, I made the argument because... No, it's a fair point. I made the argument because... Especially because of my friends now talking about planning families. And it's just struck me. No one's been horrible to me. And believe me, as you can tell, I can handle myself. But it was more that I ventured in a conversation with friends, would you ever consider having one? Because some of them... Well, we're going to talk about something shortly, I know, with you, Greg, about affording houses, my generation, about being able to do all the things that they want to do, being able to still work. We often know about how it affects, especially women in the workplace, having, just one, never mind a few children. Lots of them are in a position where actually it would make more sense for them just to have one. That would be the way of fulfilling that ambition. But they won't consider it because it's like, one child?
I'll give you a counter-argument. So, globally, we are having fewer kids, and currently, kind of on a global level, for every 120 boys, there's only 100 girls. So all of a sudden, the consequences of that actually creates a problem now. So 1 in 5 boys are not going to have an option of finding a partner because when you're having just that one child, the odds start changing. So I think one of the circumstances, I'm not pro...
Hang on, sorry, you've just missed out a very big fact with that. That's not just natural. There are countries where if you are shown on a scan, like India, to be having a girl, they make you get rid of it. So it's not natural.
Well...
The figures aren't natural.
OK,
that's due to years of patriarchy in countries like India.
That's a tiny percentage, so don't blow it out of proportion. I mean,
it's not.
OK, what is it, 1%?
All right, go on.
OK, so fine, 99... I'm 99% right.
So you've done your own stats there.
The other thing is...
Which is something I think siblings do a lot to get ahead.
Historically, people would have more children because survival rate in children were a lot lower. Yes. Whereas now, you can have one child and the chances are God willing, they're going to survive to a ripe old age. So actually, I think there is an economic sort of factor in the Western world, but also as health improves, maybe people decide that they actually if they have a child, that child is going to survive.
Did you feel you had to provide... Was it a thing for you to provide a sibling for your first child?
No,
Did
not
you have
at all.
two?
No, not at all. And funny enough, I was speaking to someone about this the other day, and they had 3 children, and they were like, well, 3's unfair because we've got, 2 boys and a girl, so we're going to have another one. They went for the 4th. They had twins, ended up with 5.
Wow.
I think 3. I always wanted 4 because I'm an only child. I wanted 4, and I've got 3. I'm trying to convince my partner to have one, but I don't think he's going to have that.
You've not won that argument
I've
yet.
not won that
Come
argument
on, use that only child power, Michelle, to get what you
my
need.
clock is about
Girl
to
power.
run out. Yeah,
And for you, when you were deciding to have 4, I mean, was that a big decision because you're one of...
Well, 2 of mine I came with my wife.
OK.
So
you inherited 2?
No, I think I love having a unit of 4 kids, and I think they like it. I think they like that community of a family. And what happens when we've gone? But that's the question for you. However, it's time to move on.
OK.
Now, lots of older people have never had it so good in our society. In fact, a report a few months back showed that pensioners are, for the first time ever, enjoying higher incomes than people in work. One of the less publicised aspects of the government's deal with the BBC is that from 2020, it will be up to the BBC board, not the government, to decide whether the over 75s should continue to get free TV licences. Now, I hope the BBC board will lead the way and have the guts to scrap the current system. There are a whole lot of other perks that could all be scrapped, means-tested or even taxed, like winter fuel allowances, free bus passes, pensioners not paying national insurance if they're still working, and above-inflation increases in state pensions. The baby boomer generation, of which I'm one, have done pretty well in life throughout their lives. No tuition fees, no student debt, relatively cheap houses, and decent pension schemes, which means a lot of them don't need further support in old age. The people who increasingly need it are their kids and their grandchildren.
Well, just to put it into context, there are 1 in 6 people, pensioners, that are living in poverty. So that's 1.8 million pensioners.
Who should be fully supported.
Right, because in your opening, you've mentioned scrap, taxed, and a lot a few times. So I think in the context of elderly people, there's a significant amount of people that live right on the line. Now, if you're accepting that's a fact...
Well, in any humane society, we support people, older people particularly, who are poor or in need. But there's an awful lot who don't, who aren't and don't need the support they're now getting. And, this whole idea of, you hear all the time, particularly if you're in the London area, of parents helping out their kids to buy houses and the rest of it. What happens if your parents haven't got that sort of money? Who helps them? And it just seems to me that we've got a system that was structured almost in the 1930s and the 1950s of this idea that old people were by and large poor. It's not true today.
But is it not a better option to let people that can afford it opt out?
They won't do it.
You don't think so?
No, they do. But I mean,
in small numbers.
Greg, statistics show that over 75-year-olds, 750,000 last year did not claim their pension entitlement. So actually, I think we've got quite a fair society, because even when they were entitled to taking that pension, 750,000 chose not to take it. I think the other argument, and I don't mind looking after older people, because one of the biggest challenges that they face, a lot of people at that age are quite lonely.
But we don't look after them. We don't do that. We don't do anything for them.
But what he's saying is don't give them free BBC licence or don't give them freebies. I'm saying, number one, there are more lonely people at that age, and if we've got benefits like...
The BBC isn't going to help them.
Sorry?
The BBC isn't going to help them.
Listen, if they've got something that they can watch, a form of entertainment... The thing, when I was researching this, the thing that just kept coming up is just how lonely these people are.
I agree with you on that, and that does concern me. If we could be in a situation where, say, we did recoup a lot of money, if it was means-tested, these benefits, which I believe they should be. They aren't means-tested. Everybody gets a free bus pass. Everybody gets winter fuel. It's not means-tested. The BBC situation, everybody gets it over a certain age. That's not even a claim thing. That's what you get. And we know why they're not means tested, because people who are over the age of 60 are the voters, and the political parties are always trying to appeal to them because that's their market. Because people from my age and down, you know, I'm 31, don't go out and vote as much as the people over the age of 50. So that's why they do it. That's why they get it, the grey vote. But what I think is more important, actually coming on to that, is if we were to get money back, if we were to do that for a moment, first of all, I would also like to talk about what could be done for younger people who are struggling and not getting nearly as many of the perks. We'll never get the exponential gains from property that the generations above us have get. We will never, ever get that. What will we get instead? I mean, I got an under-25s... train card. But what I would really love for a proper debate and a proper thing to change is that those older people who were lonely, money went in their direction, that we had joined up care and social care in this country for older people increasingly living their lives just with the BBC on. I mean, that's all Sky News. But that's you know, that's a situation we face. We don't have any sort of joined-up care for those older people.
I don't think we give our pensioners enough. I think that if you've worked exceptionally hard, if you've been a doctor, etc., and you've got to go into a nursing home, all your savings will be taken away from you. But I think on a more serious note is, Greg, what will you do without your free bus pass and TV
What would I do? I occasionally use it, I don't use it much. I will never get a free television licence because I think they'll be gone by then. But if you look at the ridiculous nature, I mean, you know, my mother, who sadly isn't with us, but if she lived with me now, I don't have to pay a television licence fee. That doesn't make sense. No, but all I'm saying is I think we came from a view of old people is that they were all poor. That is not
also
the case
living
anymore.
for short amount of time.
And actually, because of the ridiculous housing situation we've got ourselves into, particularly in the south of England, younger people are actually worse off than older people, a lot of older people. And that's why you should continue, therefore, to take more from them to give to older people. Why is pensions, if pensions are above inflation at the moment, why is that? For everybody. I would give it to people. I would give it to people who really need it. But that means assessing who really needs it. And
is that a hard thing to do? Is that a hard thing to do? Because the opt-out option, I think, if you created an opportunity for people to actually say, do you know what, I can pay for my bus pass, I can pay for my licence fee. I think if you did it in a nationwide sort of joined-up way,
criteria on savings and everything
I think a lot of people that can afford it just see it as something they don't need. I think they would put that money back into the system.
But what about the 750,000 who don't take it because they don't need it? So Greg's argument is we're giving them money that they don't need. I'm saying there's 750,000 pensioners who don't need it because they are well off and they don't take it.
But to Emma's point, where does that money go then? Does that go back in towards supporting old people that do need it?
It goes back into the economy, it goes back into
but
whatever
it gets
they
lost.
If you've got a list like Graham's suggesting, like, I could opt out of this, but instead I would have a local community centre where I could go and socialise, to your point about loneliness, that would be amazing. You know, we look at older people are better looked after now in other countries. You know, you look across Europe, let's say in Sweden, you know, there's like lovely community centres for older people to go to where they're actually, you know, there's free tea and biscuits, you know, and they can go and have these. I think the way that what Greg's saying to me is music to my ears, because I do think we give so little to younger people now. Now, if you look at how much they have to pay to go to university, if you look at how much it costs to try and get some sort of property, if you look at the rental market, I was in the London rental market until only recently, anyone can kick you out after 6 months. I'm all for free market, but you basically don't know if you're living somewhere for longer than 6 months. Though it absolutely stinks.
That's a debate for next week.
I think there's also a time when your generation are going to say, hang on, is this fair? And I already picked this argument up, that, particularly about my generation, not necessarily the over 70s, but the baby boomers. They're saying, hang on, you've had it all. And to be truthful, we have.
But, Greg, realistically, making savings on the things we've discussed from an older age group, is that really going to plug the gap between what Emma's arguing for in terms of the lack of support that young people get? It won't come anywhere close.
No, I think fairness comes into it. And Emma's dead right when she says, actually, the reason why politicians won't even discuss it is because old people vote, and they vote in very large numbers. I mean, you know, I find it depressing that it's going to be the old people who decide whether or not we stay in, whether or not Brexit wins or not. I mean, that worries
you can't
me.
now say that they can't have a vote.
Yeah, that's what he's moving to.
Nobody's taking away a freebie.
No, but it's not their future they're voting about. It's the young people's future.
I know, but you can't say because you're 65.
No, I'm not.
You're going to die soon.
I'm not suggesting you. I'm not suggesting
they
you
won't
can't
die for a long time. And the system that Greg is describing.
That's the problem.
Yeah, no, the system that Greg is describing. That's the problem with the system. Imagined a future where older people were only around till they were like 70, 75.
We need a reform of the old Benefits Act.
That is what Greg is arguing.
I think, yeah.
And some of it,
I think it's a good
you could
point.
do some of it just by taxing. You could actually just say, OK, you've got to declare... I mean, at the moment, a lot of these benefits aren't on your tax form. Well, if you're paying 40% tax, why not put it on the tax form? So at least that's something...
What does it come to, though, Greg? How much does it really... All these freebies...
Number, but I just get this feeling in our society that there is... and there's going to be more and more old people, and if you're right, there's more and more single children. I mean, actually, it's going to be fewer and fewer people supporting more and more, and that's not sustainable.
Very good argument.
James is
OK. All right, guys. Well, I've just come back from America, and I want to tell you what they're doing right and what we're seriously doing wrong.
Provocative. Straight talking. Fairness. Provocative. Straight talking.
We all like service with a smile, but it's harder and harder to find in the UK. However, it's wrong to blame the staff. I've just been in the States where great service is directly rewarded. Performance-related pay motivates employees and gives them a sense of purpose. Paying staff on commission gives workers an incentive, and I think more British businesses should consider it. The same principle is true with tips. Not all workers receive the extra money you give them in return for their efforts. But when businesses keep tips, it destroys all incentive for workers to go that extra mile. The only way to make sure the customer is always right is to do the right thing by the employees too.
I think you're being a bit harsh on UK service staff here.
Okay.
I think, I agree with you. I mean, I never forget when I first went to America a long time ago, I was staggered by just how good the service was compared to Britain. Mm-hmm. And it's still better than it is here. But I think there's been a big change over 20, 30 years, and I think you're being a bit tough. I mean, I run sort of service businesses, and I think our staff are great. I think they're very nice to people. And I'm not sure... I think, obviously, on tips, we all agree with you. I think everyone would agree that if you give a tip, you're giving it to the service, to the person who's giving the service. If you turn everything into a pay related to the service or related to the sales, what happens on a day when it's a bad day? What happens on a day when it rains all day and nobody comes out? Do you not get paid? I mean, if you're going to give incentives... I think a much better incentive is the way people are managed, and is to actually say to them, well done, thank you, you've had a good day. And actually, that's good enough.
John Lewis have a good model,
John Lewis
don't they?
partnership was a perfect, way to look at it as well, because I think that the service is unbelievable because they're all partners in the business.
But they're not incentivised on the day. No. They're incentivised on the year.
Yeah, of course, but it's still an incentive. And it's
still... Isn't the culture, as you say... correctly, I think, the culture is ingrained in the business, and I think that the service is part of that culture. If you value who you represent in the service industry, if you really value the industry you're working in, then you're much likely to follow it up with good customer services. I absolutely agree in terms of tips should go directly to the staff. I would say it should be shared amongst the staff. And one of the downsides, I think, of America, I was in New York a few years ago, and I made the mistake of not tipping someone at a bar because I used a card and I filled in the docket, and then I said, look, I'm going to buy another round of drinks. I'll put an extra tip on the next one. The harassment I got from the barman, it was a disgrace.
Oh, really?
It really was, because he was so offended. And you have to be careful, especially I think in a UK culture, that if you're too pushy with people, they'll actually go against what you're trying to achieve.
So they should definitely keep their own tips. Absolutely. I don't want to tip for an extra, fish and chips. I want to give it to the person who's serving me. But when I was in America last week, I went into this store just to buy one top. I was just wearing a pair of jeans and I needed a top. And I actually left buying 14 tops. Because
I just think you're a mug.
Unbelievable. No,
because they were on special offer.
And they were on special offer, and they were cheap as well, but, they were great. But the member of staff, the girl, was just incredible. She was saying, and have you seen this new colour, and have you seen this? And I don't feel we get that in the UK.
I feel
upselling
that's over the
all
top.
the time.
And almost, when I go shopping, I want to be left alone. I don't want people barging at me. And actually...
She didn't barge me, though. She was very nice.
I understand that, but I think when you go in... and I think lots of us have been to the States, have a nice day, how are you? And I just kind of find it a little bit intimidating sometimes. I think Britain isn't like that.
It's almost too superficial.
It's just to meet these women who are intimidating you. Get some tips. Yeah, go on.
But I quite like the sophistication of the UK. I don't think we want to be like America. We are a different country, we've got different DNAs.
But do you not see a difference between John Lewis and another
Truthfully, no. I go to Selfridges or John Lewis. I think they're both the same. I think a lot of it in businesses is who you hire. It's how you treat them. If you hire the right people who have that passion and want to do that job, I think they do it well. I think if you hire people who aren't particularly interested, then I think a lot of it is almost down to the employer. I think the concept...
That's what I'm saying, to incentivise them. I'm not blaming the staff at all, as I said in my introduction. So if you had a department store, would you not incentivise the staff to go that extra mile? I love it when someone gives me a target, I go that extra mile.
So where are you talking about? What sort of shops are like away from Selfridges and John Lewis? Are you talking about when you go to food?
There's two things I'm talking about.
Okay.
There's two things I'm talking about. The first thing is I do believe that they should all keep their own tips.
Right.
Do you think they should share them between the staff or individually keep their own tips?
Share them or keep them, but it shouldn't go to the business. It should not go to the business.
And is that a common case? I don't know, Michelle.
Yeah, it is, actually.
So companies keep it? The employee keep... Which I think is wrong.
The Business Secretary of State, Sajid Javid, said that correctly, thank goodness. He has said that it's got to stop. That if you are giving tips to a group of staff or individuals, they should keep their tips.
Well, because customers think that the tip is going to the staff.
I'm not saying all businesses
but no one disagrees with you on tips. So what was the second bit?
And the second bit is that I do believe that the staff should be incentived. Staff should be incentived.
But is that what sort of... you talked about America and how that was good, and you've talked about John Lewis, how you've had a good experience there. What's happened to you in the UK? Because I am Miss Complainer. I mean, I am literally, if you ever want me to complain for you, I'm literally chief complainer. Yeah. And I do think as customers, we have more power than ever because of social media. Like, I had terrible service recently, actually wasn't in this country, I was coming back in Europe, and the woman was so rude to me when I was getting in my flight tickets at the desk. She literally was like, move, move. And I was like, no way. And I just filmed it.
And that's the culture of the business.
We have now got power, but we do have power.
Is when I came back from the States, on Sunday, I went to Oxford Street. I'm not going to name and shame the store, OK, because I actually like the store.
But a clothing shop?
It wasn't John Lewis. I'll say that.
Were you buying tops again?
I was buying...
You get us all tops.
Jeans to match the tops. And I went in there, and they could not be asked, honestly. And they just stood there, and they wouldn't help me. And it was just like, it's over there.
But I agree. I think there is a lethargy sometimes in people's attitude towards the service industry. I think it's so undervalued in this country in general compared to other countries.
It's not seen as that.
Exactly. I have a friend who is a general manager of a very successful restaurant, and he says finding English staff that he can develop and understand and appreciate the significance of their role, they don't value it. They see it as, well, I'm working in a restaurant and it's, it's a bit beneath me. I'm generalising.
But I would argue that's his problem. I would argue that actually, it's your point. I would argue, one, is he employing the right stuff? But secondly, much more than that, is he making them feel valued? Is he making them feel good? Is he telling them what they're...
And that's the job of the manager. They see it as a temporary position.
It's a profession. It's seen in a profession in the States, and that's my difference. That's what my point is. Two different arguments.
I run a service business, so one of the phrases we constantly use and we try and encourage is that it's your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude.
Yeah,
Make a note
but
of
you're
that.
an
A lot of
entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'm all right.
You're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Some of these big department stores are PLCs.
But how
so
do you
it's
make
different. You run your business differently when you're.
No,
an
but what
entrepreneur.
I'm saying is a bit like what Greg said. I just think if you hire the people with the right attitude in the first place, who want to do that job, who have a passion...
But that's all right saying that. That is really OK saying that. I just think that we
Money
should
talks.
take
Money
a leaf
talks.
out of the American book and
Pay for service.
allow our staff to keep their tips and the teams, and we should incentivise them for going that extra mile.
Because
as
you
well.
don't know how much something costs, because you think you're buying something and then there's like sales tax added, a tip
It's
added,
tax in
and then
different
you're
states.
like, OK, this was not at all what I signed up for. I mean, and I also find it really frustrating. I've been in the exact same situation. I didn't buy 14 tops, but I bought maybe a few, I don't know. And late night in San Francisco when I was there for a job, trying to keep myself awake, the woman came in, she was like, you look amazing in that, you look amazing in that. I was like, I look terrible. Tell the truth, it will not hurt you.
But
And
she
she was
still-
like,
did she not sell more?
no, I really like it. I was like, no, I look awful. If
It's
you
like,
liked me, you
don't-
wouldn't do
us
that.
guys don't have that problem. No one in the shop ever says, you look amazing in that. They say, I don't know.
I think you need to change what shop you're going to. You go shopping with Michelle in America.
But I did, as a kid, I worked in a shoe shop on Saturdays, you know, as a schoolboy.
So did I.
And I sold, and you got a bigger commission for selling certain shoes, i.e. the ones they couldn't get rid of. Why did I? Were we all good at selling? Make sure,
Right,
were we all good at selling those?
OK,
The only
so if
job
you
is-
didn't,
but
would you
I
still
sent people
sell
out with shoes that never fitted. I mean, because I got commission on
Please
those.
get in touch with the pledge if this man sold you a pair of shoes that you're still
I
hurting.
know, but you're probably not alive now.
Greg, did it make you try harder?
Oh, yes.
Well, there you go, point. Thank you, guys.
I actually think you were the one that sold me 2 left feet. Thank you, Greg.
no.
Anyway,
Graham.
Now, my biggest claim to fame was selling Roger Daltrey a pair of plimp soles. That's what I
Very
did.
good. Take
They
that.
didn't fit either.
Moving on rather swiftly.
there you go. OK, Michelle, I know how much you like your trips to Barbados. I think you better brace yourself for my subject.
Provocative. Straight talking. Fearless. Provocative. Straight talking. Provocative. Straight talking. Fearless. Provocative.
Do you remember these photos of David Cameron in the Arctic Circle? They were meant to prove his green credentials, just like the Vote Blue, Go Green banners at the election 4 years later. But can you name a single serious long-term environmental policy that politicians have implemented? No, me neither. In fact, we're going backwards. Only last week, the first UK fracking operation was approved since 2011. I'm not convinced fracking's even safe, and I think it damages the environment. I also feel we've been badly misled by the Vote Blue, Go Green slogan. Climate change is one of the greatest threats posed to humanity. We can't ignore it any longer. It's time for our government to live up to their own mission statement and do what they are there to do: lead.
I think you're wrong, Graham, because you're saying they've done nothing. David Cameron, since he's come into power, 98% of solar has been implemented on his watch. So I think it's unfair to say he hasn't done anything. I'm not sure that it's proven that fracking is generally damaging and how damaging it is and what the consequences are. But let me just give you some stats of facts, not theory. In America, since they've elected to do fracking, it's contributed 2.1 million jobs to their economy, which you can't ignore. It's added 284 billion to the US economy, substantial sum of money. It's seen the price of gas drop by 47%. It's put more money in the pockets of, the consumer in America. Economically, to become independent from an energy point of view is a huge issue. So right now, we in Britain, we import 47% of the gas that we use, which means we are relying on other states to support us from an energy perspective. If I felt that the UK could become independent and where we could not be held to hostage by other nations and something that is so crucial and so critical to us, and it would make us independent, why wouldn't I do that?
At any environmental cost?
I didn't say that because I said it's unproven right now. So right now we are using oil, and we have been doing, you know, and based on what you're saying, we'll continue to use oil. So how much worse is it really?
Right. Well, the fact is that fracking is proving to be incredibly dangerous to the environment.
Based
in terms
on what?
On the fact that even when they did test drills in the UK, it was responsible for tremors, earth tremors.
So
that's
all
proven.
this stuff they've been drilling out of America...
The 20 million gallons of water and chemicals, the cocktail that is pumped 1,200 metres down into these gaps, these fissures to force the gas out.
But just explain to me why all of this hasn't affected America.
It has. There's plenty of examples of where in the US water is contaminated. There's examples on YouTube of people lighting water because it's got so many contaminants in it, it's become flammable. So I don't think it's unfair or unreasonable to argue that by pumping millions and millions of gallons into the Earth's surface, that there isn't going to be a downside to that at some point. And that's not even taken into account the fact that what comes out is a fossil fuel. When we're meant to be moving towards greener, renewable energies. You said the government have made great strides. Yes, they did when they first came into power. They did subsidise solar, they invested in renewables, but they've stopped all of that now.
But I think they've done 11 billion of investment.
Yeah, but they've stopped doing it now. They've taken away the subsidies.
So
actually they're reverting to type.
Go on, Michelle.
Thank you.
Fracking hell. I absolutely agree with you. I know David Cameron and the government have done an amazing job, but I don't think we should be playing around with it. I think we're messing around with it, and I think there's other alternative ways, and we're risking the future of our generations.
You're in line with Scotland then on this. Scotland have just said they're going to ban fracking.
I just don't think we should be doing it. I think there's other ways we should look at it, and I don't. You know, you're speaking about America and everything, but you know, you're messing around with things I just don't think you should be messing around with.
But hang on a minute. What James is
other alternatives.
James is talking about is interesting from the point of view of being, you know, dependent on ourselves. You know, and it's basically energy security. I mean, that's actually what it comes down to. When oil was going up and up and up in terms of price, that's when fracking looked very, very appealing. Now oil is tanked, quite literally, and we are able to get it. And I think we should be focusing now on green options because we can get oil. But with fracking, I mean, it's very, very difficult, I have to say, when I knew you were going to be bringing this up today, you know, and this kind of really comes to your bigger point, is my heart sort of dips when people want to talk about fracking, when people want to talk about climate change or the environmental issues. One, because I'm woefully ignorant, and I think most people are. Two, because it's the type of thing that shouldn't be party political. It's the type of thing that whatever party is in charge, whoever is in charge, this should be a priority. But let me tell you, this exchange that just happened in front of me here, and I don't mean to be rude to either of you, you said some figures, you said some stuff about chemicals, and people at home will be none the wiser as to who is correct. Because just right now, before I came on, the latest report from 2 federal agencies in America, which has been criticised, but 2 federal agencies has said there is no significant detriment to the environment from fracking. And you're saying what you're saying, and you're saying you see YouTube videos of people lighting fluid. People are so woefully ignorant about this topic that we do require strong leadership.
What we need...
I agree.
What we need... And I am ambivalent on it, but I would certainly try some experiments in this country, and I'd then actually measure them, see, one, what were the advantages, what were the disadvantages? Was it environmentally damaging or wasn't it? I don't know. But now, I know what happens is when you do all that, you still get lined up one side and the other side, and they won't change because they're not interested in the facts. But let's measure it. Let's try it in a couple of places and just see what happens.
And when they did try it, it was responsible, or highly likely to be responsible for...
highly likely is
the other point is irrespective of the damage that it does by extracting the shale gas, and we can argue about this all day, is the continued use of fossil fuels, which adds massive amount of CO2 to the environment and a huge amount of methane, which is even more dangerous. So whilst we're meant to be moving forward to using technologies, to developing renewable energy, we're actually going backwards because, as James says, it's about energy security. We can do that with renewables.
Yeah,
we can
got it, but then you meet
because it's not invested properly.
With renewables, I mean, your meetings, I mean, you know, whole arguments are made by whole communities about why they don't want photovoltaics dominating their countryside. The same thing about windmills in the sea. I mean, in the end, we have to make a decision as a society. Do we want to keep energy? And if not, there are some decisions we have to take, and some of them aren't going to be very pleasant.
I don't think we should be taking a risk on our future generation. You know, in 60 years from now, who knows what this is doing to our planet.
But you'd have said that about coal mining,
exactly.
200 years ago.
And oil.
And yet we built the whole of our economy, the whole of the Industrial Revolution was built about coal mining.
We've learned from that. We've learned from the damage that's done. And with science, technology, with the opportunity, with materials, you know, we waste so much.
So what do you want David Cameron to do? You've got the mic.
Well, it needs to be suspended. For me, it needs to be suspended. There should be a ban on fracking until...
So you're happy to see 1 million jobs go out the window?
No, because you create jobs in renewable energy fields.
But we've tried for the last 10 years.
We need a proper, structured plan on how to be energy efficient. We're not even energy efficient on new buildings of houses and such like.
Am I talking to Graeme Le Saux, the Energy Minister?
We need to set better standards and create a more energy efficient way of using our resources, because they are running out and we're taking more and more risks environmental risks, in order to deliver what is a very old-fashioned technology. And for me, that has to change.
Well, I don't agree with you.
So burn it. If it's there in its energy, burn it. Well, I've had my say about David Cameron, but being PM's a very tough job. But somebody's got to do it.
I will tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. So tell me what you want, what you really, really want. I want to really, really want to be Prime Minister. If you want to be Prime Minister, you've got to get with my friends. We are in this together. Friendship never ends. And if you want to be Prime Minister and lead a Conservatives, I can tell you this job is not easy. That's the way it is. So here's a story to see if you want to succeed. Lead listen carefully. You've got Boris in the place, he likes it in the face. GMP likes the publicity. Doesn't come quickly. He's the Home Secretary. As for me, you always stand your money down, find it all, and stand your deficit down. If you want to be Prime Minister.
Which Spice Minister is David Cameron?
I never thought I'd see Margaret Thatcher say zig-a-zig-ah. That is definitely my favourite mashup. Congratulations to whoever made that at Sky News.
Fantastic. Well, that's it from us. Send us a tweet if you loved or hated what we've said, or if you've got something you think we should be debating. More straightforward talking next week. Goodbye.
Provocative. Straight talking. Fearless. Provocative. Straight talking.
Looking forward to being back on next week's show and winding up my pledge panelists just a little. So, see you then. Bye.
Provocative. Straight talking. Fearless. Provocative. Straight talking.